Yeah. And I already hear some people in the audience saying, well, like if you do both roles, then you'll lose some of that creativity. So part of like having these roles separate is that the designer can go to the moon with their concepts, and then the developer kind of keeps them accountable and brings them back. So you might, because you understand the constraints, maybe you'll design within those constraints. Do you have a bit of pushback on that, on someone kind of with that mindset?
It's something I've heard and read about in the current design. We are kind of live now. Is what I always wanted to say. We are live.
We are officially live.
We are officially live. Exactly. I mean, this is just an experiment.
Last year, there was a lot of change. I think this year is going to be quite shocking. I think I'm going to call it the year of the builder. Just a lot of changes are going to be happening at the title level. A lot of consuming of different titles into one, or merging, is going to be probably the theme of this year. I think I'm calling that. AI is going to be another theme this year, and I think I'm seeing a lot of change, and a lot of people are uneasy at the moment. I don't know if you're feeling the same. A lot of tension, but especially in the design community.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, for sure. I think we all want to do everything with AI. Even if it doesn't have to be AI. We're looking at things that are perfectly fine. Like maybe we can just replace it with something that's equally fast or equally good. But then just because it's AI, it's better. And that's an uneasy feeling that I think many designers have. Like I should use AI all the time for everything, but I don't know how, I don't know where. And that's a feeling I think we all have, but also something that we should see if we can take away.
I think so. I think it all starts, if we think, let's focus on design here. So I think for the longest time, I think we've done ourselves a bit of a disservice. So if you look at like the org, or like if you're doing freelance or if you're in-house, there's usually a lot of collaboration with the internal team. So typically you have the project manager, you have the designer, and then you have the engineer. And then we're doing this top potato dance of like moving something out the door. And we're all playing this pretend dance of keeping ourselves accountable. So product managers usually have like the business in mind, like keeping the scope clean. Design is trying to make sure we're empathizing and pushing for the user, and developers are just trying to get their backlog cleaned. I mean, there's nuance there. They're trying to get perfect code, trying to build scalable systems, etc. But what designers always, I think, what their strategy is, because the feeling is like people don't see the value in what we do. It's like this we make pretty pixels thing. So like we've marketed it in probably an incorrect way. And the strategy that we deployed was being more empathetic. Like everyone can be a designer. We're creating these whiteboarding sticky board sessions, like keeping everyone involved, doing collaboration, making it cool to be a designer. But in doing that, we've kind of lost the mark there. I think what we should have been doing is pushing for the value that design brings to the table versus, hey, it's fun to be a designer. I think we've lost a bit of that. And the consequence is that I think at either end, project management and leadership, they're adopting some of those design thinking methodologies, some of those tools. So they're encroaching on our space. And I feel like if we don't put up a stand or show like the true value of design, eventually design is going to lose its kind of footing at the table in the end.
Are you saying that should be the main focus for a product designer looking to survive 2026?
Yeah, I think you should. There are two paths. It's either you take the project management or leadership route, or you take up development. There's these tools are accelerating the need for things to be shipped out of the door quickly, and the less people in the room kind of doing this pretend, keep each other accountable game, the better. So if you're a designer who knows how to write code and ship things, like you have the context of like the user and the constraints of the code, that marriage I think is really powerful.
What would you say to someone who's against designers who should code, and that someone is a designer themselves. Like, I'm a designer, they are developers, they should do their thing, I should do my thing. So they're hesitant to make that change.
I don't think you have, like, you can draw that line in the sand, but I don't think it's going to cost you in the end. I think the developer tools are getting so accessible that, like, it takes less effort than it did before to get. You don't have to have 100% understanding. Some of these, like, code editors or IDEs are getting accessible enough to, like, facilitate someone with a low level, like, development knowledge to create a thing. Now, I'm not saying that designers are replacing developers, because, like, they have a specific skill set, but the overlap is getting it's really getting there. So if you can design and create prototypes and produce a thing, rather than, like, a pretty picture Figma slide, like, prototype that has hotspots, create an actual thing that works, that you can actually prototype test with clients, and then it's fed with actual data. That's a really good tool to, like, get the data that you need. And also, it removes this whole idea of design system management, where, like, we're hoping that developers implement this pretty picture design system that we have. If you can actually design and then implement it one-to-one, the parity is there. And then there's a lot of work that's removed in the process.
Yeah. So, I mean, if I understand you correctly, what I think I'm hearing is that you're really focusing on, like, the starting point. You mentioned getting data. So if you can code, you can get the data, and then what happens once you do? Like, do you then still hand it over to a developer, or do you think a designer can code on a production code level? So can they make something that goes live, basically, like a real feature, or is there still a wall there between discovery and deliverability?
I think we're getting close to having designers ship their work. I think they're within limits. I think there are, like, super complex features that required a lot of back-end work and a lot of logic that may be out of the scope of what a designer can do currently. But that's the gap that I think we should eventually close.
Right, right. Because interesting thing is for one of my biggest and also favorite clients, I do certain features I work on from start to finish. Design,
Yeah,
and then also putting it live. Like, there's still, like, a review process, but that same process is there for the very seasoned developer as well. So that's I wouldn't consider that to be a wall. It's just me being part of the discussion and working and contributing to the actual live product. I think that's been a massive breakthrough for me as a designer, but also for the value I bring, but also for the quote unquote respect, basically, for the role. Not for me personally, I don't really mind, but this designer can build what he's designing. I think that's a wow factor for a designer. And last year, 2025, I felt like that was being ahead of the curve. But I feel like this year it will be on the curve. So it's not going to be as novel as it was last year. I think
exactly.
more people are expecting it to be the case. I still think you will be like a top 10% designer if you do it that way.
Yeah.
But not a top 1% designer anymore that you were
Yeah.
last year.
Yeah, I think we're moving the goalposts here. I think that will become the new norm. So, like, the merging of that role. And the unicorn is now the person who can do the triad. So, like, product management and design. And so that'll be the new goalpost of, like, where we see that unicorn designer kind of live.
Yeah.
But, like, to your point, like, you're already doing this already. And, like, the value to me is clear, but maybe you can kind of delve into, like, the value of understanding the code base that you're working on. And then there's the removal of a process where there's that communication between design and dev, just trying to understand the constraints.
Yeah.
The things that you have to keep in mind, like, what is that like when you're the person designing and knows how it can be implemented?
I think whenever you communicate between two people from different roles, so designer, developer in this case, there's noise on the communication line. misunderstanding. A designer, a very cliche designer, a stereotypical designer, creates beautiful things.
Yeah.
Goes way overboard compared to the thing being asked from the designer. I exaggerate, of course, a little bit, but
Yeah.
redesign this button and then you get a whole new page. Not keeping in mind the constraints of the frameworks being used, timelines, and how long it will take for developer to build something. So that's the cliche designer on one end, and then the cliche developer on the other end looks at your design and then builds something that's about 60% there, like it's all over the place, layout is off, it doesn't look like what you designed, and then they ask you like, this is right? So there's annoyance there, like the designer is like, this developer, he'll get it wrong, and I have to pinpoint everything that's going wrong, and then we go back and forth. It takes a while, and then the developer's thinking, this silly designer is going to create way too much, and gradients and animations, and it's just too much. So both parties are annoyed. When you are a designer who can also build, and you're familiar with your code base, with your client's code base, like, oh, it's Tailwind or it's Bootstrap or it's React. Like you know what's possible. You can actually look inside of the code base. You know what you'll encounter there. So you can look what's already been done, see if you can reuse a bit of it. So the package you send over to a developer is way closer to being a realistic and finished product compared to what you would normally do if you do not know how a developer wants to receive it. So that just saves a lot of time, a lot of frustration and headache. And I think that's a big time saver. And then AI is not even mentioned yet. It's just you knowing about code.
Mm-hmm.
That is a massive time saver, and you will be a good friend to all your colleagues. AI just helps you learn and do things you wouldn't be able to do before. So it's one of my biggest AI principles is to become better first and faster second. Like, I think that's the big goal for me, at least. And I'll stop there because I noticed I'm starting to ramble a little bit, but I'm sure I'll have more to say. But
No, I mean, and
pausing
that's
here.
fair. And I already hear some people in the audience saying, well, like if you do both roles, then you'll lose some of that creativity. So part of like having these roles separate is that the designer can go to the moon with their concepts, and then the developer kind of keeps them accountable and brings them back. So you might, because you understand the constraints, maybe you'll design within those constraints. Do you have a bit of pushback on that, on someone kind of with that mindset?
Yeah. It's something I've heard and read about in the current design community discussion on that topic. So yes, that shooting for the stars versus pushback. What I always say then in that case is just let me build it. If the developer's like, well, that's too much work. I'm like, well, I enjoy the work. Just let me do it. It's a win-win. We get a better product. You don't have to do it. I'll do it. And all you have to do is review it in the end. So that's one way. Second way is, the triple goalpost that you talked about. That third one, I think, the project management one, it applies here. Like, because you are a designer and a developer, you know what the over the top long shot is. You also know what the exact thing is you are allowed to design. But then if you go one step beyond, and you can build it because you're also a developer, that's a much easier sell compared to you just designing something and not knowing how much work it is.
Yeah.
You don't know if it's a moonshot or something in between. Now I do. So it's I have more insight and control over the cards that I'm holding and the ones I'm going to play.
And I think that's true. I think for the person who wants the code and design, like that's something you have to be aware of. And then like if we were to reach on the other side of the field, so the project manager, the person who has like the business knowledge, I think that same dance is true. So like having one issue I think design has is that they don't have the full business context. So like they're not in all of the client meetings, they're not in some of those strategy sessions. So like there's a bit of context that's missed for you as a designer. You're kind of piecing like you're getting a bit of the constraints from what the development's doing, you're getting a bit of the information from product, and you're doing your research, but there's like the business strategy that's kind of missing. But I feel like if you have that full context, that makes you a better designer because you have understanding of like the market, not just this user specifically. So you can help the business a bit more if you have that business context. So like our goal for this year is to hit these business KPIs. How does, when I'm thinking of like new features or roadmap, how does that shape what we're going to be building so that we know that we're building the right thing versus what I think based on the limited knowledge that I'm being fed from both angles.
Yeah. I think that's true. And I think it becomes worse the bigger a company is, different departments and departments containing different teams. Um, and I think that's a crucial skill for a designer to have, 2026, but also in all the years before. Curious to think about if AI is helpful there, or if it's just a matter of soft skills and something that needs practice, talking to stakeholders and playing the politics game.
Yeah, I think AI can facilitate some of the research that's needed. So like some of the desk research, AI can do some of that. Nothing replace like an actual user interview, but AI can help in that area. But
Yeah.
like the the soft skills are very important because because you understand what the business needs, you still need to communicate it. And then you have to be the voice of the user and the company that like your strategy or your opinions will help shape the business for the better. So, like if you have good ideas and they just live in Confluence or Notion and you don't have anyone pitching for it, like they're just going to die at the table. So those soft skills like stakeholder management, convincing people that your ideas are really important. I think that's a skill that
Yeah.
you'll have to get if you can lean towards that area.
Yeah. So do you think you can be all three? Or is it like always, like before? You have this group of three and you can only pick two.
I think you can. If I'm talking about startup world, I think yes.
Mm.
I think you can. I'm not saying you should be a solopreneur and you should build. There's probably a world where someone can build a product like $100 million SaaS product by themselves. Not anytime soon. But I think the builder, what I'm calling them is builders, they'll have combination of the three. And then it's about leadership from that point is assembling a team that's complementary in terms of like what people excel at, but it won't just be designer, developer, product person. It's these people who are good, who have context of like the whole landscape of like product development, and you just kind of fit them together in a proper way.
Right. So it's perhaps also building a team around you that complements or help you have a specialty in the places where you are kind of okay.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's really going to shift the way I think job boards look. I think the title is going to become irrelevant. I think the skill set is going to become more important.
Yeah.
Like, can you do X and Y? And it's going to be less verticalized, like looking for develop with these set of skills. Just like we need a builder who has strength in this area, who has this background, etc. And I also think domain knowledge is going to be at the top of the list as well. So yes, you've worked in these different industries, but like I'm looking for someone who's really good at e-commerce and they've had like 8+ years of experience in e-commerce and that's what they
Right.
do. Like they're an e-commerce builder.
Right. Yes. I mean, so builder is going to be the new label then, according to you, right? Because people like to label things.
Yeah.
Nothing
Yeah.
wrong with that, by the way.
Yeah. I think that's what I'm going to call it. I just want to skip the tradition that we've done in like we have designer, then UI designer, then UI UX designer, then it's product designer. Like let's skip ahead to the prefixes that we're adding to our title. I think we're just going to be building stuff.
Right.
Like
I mean, that's basically what we're doing anyway. Like a designer is very likely to work in software. So you're designing software or you're part of the building process of software. Yes, that's. I mean, I think that's probably going to change, but it's also going to take a while still because you're looking at my corporate days. They had specialized people, within the design team. We had a design chapter of 50 people, and then out of those 50, we had like a mini research team and a mini branding team, and then all the other people were generalists, UX designer, in the full sense, like, from first idea to validation and everything in between. I haven't been there in a while, but I'm curious to see if they will dissolve the research team and just make everyone that, more generic generalist title.
Like as tradition goes, I think they're going to lag behind, but I think there's going to be a signal to them, like
Yeah.
the outside of that spaces. If they're really doing their research, they should see what works in the market. And even though
Yeah.
they've been historically slow, I think they're going to have to keep up.
Yeah, because I've also worked in places where would take 3 years to get a simple plugin approved.
That's another way to do ship fast and iterate.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I personally like this way of working of think big and act small, in a sense that it's good to have vision and direction, but little steps to get feedback fast and iterate and adjust and improve along the way. So no big bang releases. Have something ready today, see how the world reacts, even if it's going to be a terrible version 1. And I really think that fits that builder mentality that you're talking about for 2026.
Yeah, I think I'm going to see a lot of pushback this year on like, it's just too much. I already do so much. Well, guess what? We're about to do more, but I don't think it's going to be as hard as we think. I think I talked about it a couple of episodes earlier that we're just going to become the art directors that we've always wanted to be, and then these tools facilitate. So what that means is that domain knowledge is super important. So like having a foundation in product, in design, in development, so you understand what happens. But like some of these, like I've been hanging out with some developers where they're like, AI is just basically building some features on its own. Like that's how things are, like the low hanging fruit. Like AI has been tasked to complete whole features. I also saw another podcast where there's remember Team Treehouse back in the day? That's kind of where
I think I do. Yeah.
It was like an online university where it would teach you how to code.
Oh, yes. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I watched an interview recently where like that founder, on GitHub in an open source, he created something you can pull into your project, which basically can create its own PRD and then tackle large projects like you would in the normal development cycle. So if it takes 3 sprints or 2 sprints to complete the feature, it's not going to one-shot it. What it's essentially going to do is break down the task into mini tickets and then complete one ticket at a time. And then it'll send its own pull request, and then obviously a human will have to approve it. But like I think that's where we're going.
Yeah, it's something I've been seeing more recently are agent loops. And I think that's what you're talking about more or less, right? So to have it loop and repeat and do things until it hits a goal. But that kind of bumps with what I'm seeing in practices where you design something and then the developers and stakeholders, they're really thinking about like, why do we want to do something? And there are lots of security constraints that you have to keep in mind and quality levels you want to hit. I think that the downside of such an autonomous loop is that it's going to do something and then it thinks it's done. And then turns out, it's okay. If it's good enough, nice, next. But if it isn't, you're going into a loop on your own. You have to fine tune it, have a different prompt or correct it. And then sit back, do something else, wait for it to come back. And, that might repeat itself a few times. And that's probably going to be a short-term problem. In the mid to long term, it's going to be so good that you do not have that problem anymore. But staying away from an annoying, no, I didn't mean this loop is going to be very important. And it also shows how important knowing what you want and being able to describe what you want is going to be, or already is, basically. You cannot have a prompt that ends with "do not make mistakes," period.
Yes, you're gonna have to define what those mistakes are. I think prompting is at the first level. It just the guardrail portion is like the business logic or the architectural logic is also important as well. So like,
Yeah.
don't just let it run wild and then turning into Terminator 2. You're gonna have to put some logic behind to make sure that if it's going through its loops, it understands the constraint.
Yeah. And I mean, that's very something you have to be aware of because, by nature, we are time savers. We want to take shortcuts, save energy, survive as human beings. And I'm already noticing it within myself. Like when AI was new, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to check everything. It's going to have a human in the loop and we're not going to be lazy. Quality is important. But I'm noticing now already is that I'm getting into this mindset of, I don't want to do it. Just have AI do it. But then I really have to force myself to still check it in the end. So you're moving your own baseline of how much you want to do. So keeping that laziness out the door is going to be very, very important to have a high level of output, I think.
That's very important. Yeah, because you can lose, like, you can be building something and then lose what it's building. So like, it is important. Like, it does a really decent job of the output that you need. So of creating copy, creating a design, creating piece of code. And you can get into that flow state where like, I trust it, it's doing, but it does hallucinate a lot. So like, what are the mechanisms or like the quality checks that you should be doing, like as you're like, to kind of stop yourself, like as you're building, like what should you be doing? Should you just be like being pragmatic, stop yourself, okay, I'm actually going to read what the output is, or have some kind of other way to kind of have the context of like what's been done?
Yeah. And I think that's going to be crucial because you have to know what you want, first of all. So that's potentially going to take a lot of brainstorming, workshops, and meetings with stakeholders and alignment, all the politics. And then in the end, you have to really sit down and verify that you get what you want. And with what I think, like the main discussion in design land and AI land and all these places is it's going to be so fast, but I really think that's dangerous because if being faster is the goal, you are very likely to skip important steps just so you can say, well, I didn't use Figma for this at all. It's just a one shot. Look how cool this is. This just took me 15 minutes, so perhaps a product designer can be a opposition to it this year. Like, yes, use AI, but also, yes, be slow almost on purpose. Really take your time and check the quality. Because perhaps when this whole hype circus is going to die down, the ones with quality will stand out.
That's fair. Yeah, the one shot never works. You think it works, but if you massage like in true design fashion, the more iterations, the better it gets, and you'll notice, like that old saying, like no one knows the difference between 90% and the difference between 90% and 100%. I think because the bar is being set really high with all this automation, I think we'll be able to tell the difference between that 10% there.
Yes. And there's also a difference between being able to tell and feeling the difference.
Yeah.
You want to, as a user, you don't want to be here, right? You don't want to have to interact with any tool. Like you just want to have that goal and continue with your day. And they will notice how easy something is going to be or how annoying something is going to be, even when the difference is just 10%. But we will do an episode on prompting, right? I think it's coming up in like 2 or 3 or 4 episodes. I don't know the exact number, but that's a little in-between teaser. Because I don't think many people talk about it. Like it's really just, hey, here's my super cool lead magnet 100 plus prompts. And then it's just generic nonsense. But the rules behind it, like it's just like my grandma when she was alive, like 91 years old. I taught her how to use a TV remote, just how to turn it on, turn it off, and increase and lower the volume. And then I would have the default channel be the thing that she always watches. But she didn't get the logic behind the remote. She just memorized the steps. And that's what you're going to get if you're going to use those prompt libraries. What I really want designers to focus on is the logic behind the remote, or in our case, the logic behind what to prompt, what type of prompts to put in, and when. Like, should I go for a one shot here? Should I have more of a conversation first, let it build context, and then ask for the output? There's pros and cons for both. And we as designers, we should really, because we're about understanding users, we should really focus on the logic behind it.
Yeah, because the prompt it has to be crafted the right way. Like the right prompt for the right situation is super important. If your prompt doesn't include some of the logic or the context that it needs, it's getting something that I didn't ask it. Curious question to teaching your grandmother how to use the remote: was masking tape involved?
No, there wasn't.
Okay.
Yeah, I did see the pictures and the memes later on, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. But it's also error prone. Like when she grabs the thing and then the tape moves over, or it gets dirty or whatever. But I did really like the idea. No, I didn't use it, sadly.
That was a great episode. So if you like this content and want to hear more, please like and subscribe.
Yeah, and if you want to see more, please go to designtablepodcast.com, Spotify, Apple Music, all the big players, and more.